Happy Halloween, everyone. Today we will explore some inexplicable true stories for this scary occasion. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Story 1. More than a decade ago, during a crisp autumn season, I purchased a Honda Goldwing motorcycle. I'd heard that new motorcycles needed a breaking-in period, requiring solo rides without excess load or passengers for about 5,000 kilometers to complete the process. To expedite this, I used any spare time to venture around. Eventually, an idea struck me. Rather than endlessly traversing flat roads, why not explore the mountains? The following cloudy morning, I embarked solo on my beloved motorcycle with the mission to conquer the neighboring mountains. With anticipation, I followed the road and arrived at the mountain pass within a half hour. The thrill of it being my first mountainous motorcycle ride was unparalleled. The scenery alternated between golden and red forests, painting the mature beauty of the landscapes, a sight impossible to witness within the city, even during spring. My journey was scenic, but solitary. However, despite increasing altitude and the cold realities of riding a motorcycle, with both my face and hands going numb, the inclination to turn back never struck me. Instead, I accelerated to navigate the continuous twists and climbs of the road, reinforcing my determination to conquer the kindling mountains. Throughout the secluded terrain, encountering scarcely a single soul, I was left in my lonesome pursuit. But regardless of the occasional passing car, the frigid winds only compounded the numbness I felt in my extremities. Yet, the motorcycle steadily maintained a pace between 20 and 40 miles per hour as I continued forward, feeling much like an unswerving automaton. Suddenly, an inexplicable moment struck. I found myself utterly confused in a situation that felt dreamlike. The motorcycle was standing almost vertical on a soft patch of ground at the mountain's cliff. I was positioned against the motorcycle, facing the cliff, both of us within a half-meter wide drainage ditch at the foot of the cliff. As I regained consciousness and came back to reality, I was utterly dumbfounded. What just happened? How? What is this? I repeated to myself. I stood there, bewildered, surveying the desolate mountainside. The surroundings were eerily still, as if time had frozen. Gazing at the sky, the earth, and myself, it all felt surreal, akin to a dream. How did I arrive at this place? How could the motorcycle stand vertically at a 90-degree angle? How did I get here? It was an absurd angle. I've studied physics, and I know the terrifying force of impact. But how did I not feel a thing? The motorcycle had been crawling up the hill at a speed of 20 to 30 miles per hour. At such a low speed, it should have fallen into the drainage ditch when hitting the slope, resulting in a rollover. It defied logic for it to stand on the soft ground beside the drainage ditch. This required immense speed and skill. The speed could have thrown me forcefully against the slope, head first. When did I lose consciousness? When did the motorcycle tilt? Why did it hit precisely this 1 meter wide soft patch, not the rocky cliffs on either side? Why didn't it fall into the left valley? The scenario defied reason. The speed, angle, everything seemed off. I should have either crashed against the cliff or tumbled into the valley. However, by some miraculous alignment, the motorcycle and I ended up standing perfectly on this soft strip, where under normal circumstances, it would have slid sideways into the drainage ditch. The present angle, though, was perpendicular to the road surface. I really have no idea how to answer these questions. When at wit's end, I suddenly remembered my mother, who had converted to Buddhism in her youth, not monastically, constantly telling us about the goodness of Buddhism. I thought, could I have encountered a divine being? Was it the Buddha preventing me from crossing the mountains? At that moment, everything seemed to click into place, and I made a decision to return. I quickly checked my hands, legs, and body, surprised and overjoyed to find not a scratch or discomfort. I turned back to my motorcycle, some of its wheels still entrenched in soil and grass. Standing by the road, I tried to move the bike, but it was too heavy, only managing to rock it slightly. I patted off the soil from my hands and stood on the road, hoping for someone to pass by and help me. After waiting for a long time, a small car passed without stopping, ignoring my signals. I realized self-reliance was the only option. Having failed to move the bike, I attempted a different method. After strenuously dragging the rear wheel bit by bit into a drainage ditch, I managed to position the motorcycle in line with the ditch. However, I didn't have the strength to pull it up. Walking down the ditch, I discovered an opening in the ditch that seemed perfect for escape. Returning to the bike, I pushed the motorcycle up and carefully maneuvered it down the narrow ditch. Reaching the opening, it became a smooth process of pulling the bike onto the road through this heaven-sent escape route. After inspecting the bike, I was astonished to find it completely intact, apart from some wet soil inside the exhaust pipe. I picked up a twig and meticulously cleaned it. I looked up at the sky, down at the ground, back at my beloved bike, and couldn't help but burst into laughter. The sky was still the sky, the ground still the ground, and it felt as if I had lived another life. I approached the bike, patting it as I said, "Let's go back, buddy. The heavens don't want us to move forward." I tried to start the bike, but it didn't respond despite having no damage. After a few more pats and shakes, the bike started. I cleared my thoughts and swiftly left that surreal place. Many years have passed, and I've shared this story with friends, family, and colleagues, yet no one could explain its mysteries. I used to be a staunch materialist, but since that incident, I immediately began to question the overly self-assured materialism. That theory cannot explain the experience I had. Since then, I believe in the existence of divine beings, because only a divine power could delicately place me and my motorcycle in such a fitting location without any harm. Story 2. That night, about 2 years ago, I lived in the downtown area of a major urban city. I was a night owl, accustomed to sleeping around 3 or 4 in the morning. So I would be extremely bored every night after my partner falls asleep. To kill time, I'd often take a solitary stroll on the deserted streets, calming my usually busy mind. I maintained this routine for many years. I had never felt an ounce of fear strolling alone through the deserted streets in the early hours. On the contrary, I often joked with my partner about how good the public safety was in our town. However, that confidence in my night-walking habit was shattered and never returned in a mere 10 minutes by a mysterious man. I remember it was a Wednesday night, between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. I was taking a walk in the park a few streets away from home. It was an exceptionally quiet night. The entire park, covering hundreds of square meters, except for me and my elongated shadow, had no one else around, not even a stray cat. There were no vehicles passing on the roads near the park, allowing me to freely dance in the middle of the road. I first noticed the unknown man when I started to head back home. I was walking to the main street opposite the park, and he was standing at the end of the street, dancing under the white streetlights. His dance was peculiar. You might describe it as resembling the waltz, but I'd rather say it was akin to someone suffering an epileptic seizure. He danced in a bizarre fashion, almost sliding forward in a comical manner. It took me a while to realize that he was slowly inching toward the spot I was standing. At that time, I didn't think much about it, assuming he was just an ordinary drunkard, so I continued walking. As he got closer, I realized he appeared unusually elegant. Tall and slender, he wore a baggy, shabby, old-fashioned suit. He danced closer, allowing me to notice more of his oddly abnormal details. Despite the myriad movements of his arms and legs, he seemed like a stroke patient, twisting his head at an odd angle, gazing into the dark night sky. His eyes, both big and white, akin to ping-pong balls, emitted a crazed gleam. His small black pupils seemed to sneakily stare at me, casting a crazy glow, as a strange smile blossomed on his long, pointed face. I wasn't foolish. I saw his smile and eyes, which made me immediately cross the street, thinking the farther I was from him, the better. As I reached the opposite street, I turned back, and I was petrified, halting in my tracks. The man was now directly opposite to me, facing me, having stopped his eerie dance, but maintaining his peculiar arch posture. He still faced upward, while his smile grew larger and crazier, almost pulling his mouth corners to the height of his nose. Anxiety and fear began to take root in my mind. I dared not run in panic, fearing it might provoke him. I continued forward, my gaze fixed on him. As I assured myself I was at least half a street away from that man, I glanced ahead, only to find the entire street still empty, and my home was 3 blocks away. I turned back to look at the man across the street, hoping to see no trace of him, and he was gone, vanished without a trace. I heaved a sigh of relief, but on closer inspection, he was right behind me. He stood about 15 meters away, concealed in the shadows of the trees, still holding the same posture, facing me. I was sure I hadn't heard any running steps, but his current position was at least 20 meters closer than before, and I had only turned my head for about 10 seconds, indicating he had run at an incredibly fast speed. His sudden approach left me at a loss for words. We both stood there, stunned, our eyes meeting. It might have been just a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Suddenly, he lunged toward me in a big step. He dashed at me, as if a cartoonish thief, arching his feet, tiptoeing like a ballet dancer, but with a frighteningly fast speed. I had thought of taking out my phone or running, but at that moment, overwhelming fear had paralyzed me. My feet felt frozen, and I could only watch in shock as he drew closer and closer. I thought I was done for. But when he was just a meter away from me, he abruptly stopped. He was still gazing skyward and continued smiling crazily. Originally, I intended to shout at him, "What the hell are you doing?" But I was too scared. My lips trembled, almost turning my words into a muffled whimper. "You..." The stranger didn't respond, but he seemed to be moved by my pitiful appearance. He turned and walked away, resuming his strange dance, hobbling off. I dared not take my eyes off him, at least until he was out of sight. But when he had gone about half a street's distance, he suddenly stopped and turned and ran toward me. This time, it was a full-speed, lightning-fast dash, a dash toward me. He charged at me like a monster from a nightmare, and I screamed out in fear. His rigid, contorted limbs, the head twisted in an unusual angle, the mad and smiling face, and in a blink, he was almost within arm's reach. I sprinted like a child, screaming as I ran. I ran frantically until my legs weakened, and I slumped beside a traffic light. I quickly turned around and found that the man didn't follow. On my way home, I felt like a hunted deer, nervously glancing around, fearing he might suddenly appear on some street corner. But fortunately, this time he had truly vanished without a trace. After that night, I never took another nighttime walk, not even dared to go out alone. Even after many years, that face with its crazy smile still occasionally appears in my dreams. I can guarantee you that man wasn't drunk or on drugs. His dance, the smile on his face, revealed a stark madness, pure insanity, which indeed was very, very, very frightening. How did you like those stories? Let me know in the comments. Have a great spooky Halloween.